Now, what open budget is seeking to do is to give you more information about what our spending decisions are and how your taxes are being used. And certainly we have indicated, let's talk about one of the more controversial issues, because in the open budget document, we floated a number of ideas. One was reducing the betting tax, because it seems to have been an impediment to raising revenue, and sometimes when you lower, you get greater participation. But let's talk about the one that's probably more on your mind, the issue of the customs duty. Why did one even think? Why did I think of doing that as a Minister of Finance? Well, we provided payroll tax relief to the retail industry in an effort to save the jobs of 4,000 Bermudians that are in the industry. We also wanted to encourage Bermuda residents to keep their money in Bermuda, and the duty at the time was increased to 35%. Lots of criticism about it, and many feel and doubt that they have the right to spend their money as they choose. But here are some statistics for you to consider. The airport duty increase was instituted to help preserve jobs in the retail sector, and there are roughly 4,000 jobs in the retail sector in 2011. There was just over $1 billion spent annually in Bermuda retail. That means that roughly for every $1 million spent, it supports roughly 4 jobs in our local sector. So $70 million spent overseas during a business vacation trip equates to about 280 jobs. Now, the $70 million spent overseas is the value of merchandise imported directly and when you come back on a trip. It doesn't include that monies that are spent in terms of courier services for personal use. So the total of retail purchases spent abroad is higher than the $70 million. And that helps support jobs overseas as opposed to Bermuda. Now, the airport customs duty rate was also increased to help offset the reduction in payroll tax receipts given the zero rate concession to retail outlets for a 6-month period. This was at a cost of $9 million. The estimated net revenue loss from this payroll tax concession, after taking into account the airport customs duty increase, is projected at between $3 and $5 million. Now, as we look at how we go and we do the fiscal policy for budget 2012-13, some ideas were put in the open budget, both in terms of harmonizing the duty rate. It could include reducing the 35%. It could include raising some of the cost for personal goods that are imported. And that's all part of the whole ball of wax as you look at what are your funding and your fiscal decisions. And the issue is that Bermuda would be nice if we truly were another world, but certainly we are impacted by international circumstances and also the recession globally. Now, what we're seeking to do is provide an opportunity even as we talk about revenue-raising measures. You would have heard, and Minister Michael Scott at another meeting talked about asset sales. Government doesn't like asset sales generally, but you've heard about islands, you've heard about some post offices which have stopped being open in terms of some of our sub-post office stations. There are opportunities. You've also heard about whether we should be looking at giving long leases on certain areas in terms of raising revenue. But there's a total, I suppose, you look at the view as to what can you do that is innovative and at the same time that can help to preserve opportunities and assistance to those who need it. Now, each of the ministries and the ministers, I should say, that are represented and the ministers that are here are going to talk about some of the particular challenges as they look at what they're allocated and how they decide how to allocate it. Some areas have also seen and already seen innovative measures to contain and curtail their costs, and at the same time make sure that you provide a basic delivery of services. That's why we talk about the fact that even some curtailment of existing concessions. because at the same time, you know that when you've given freebies, where there has to be the opportunity to sometimes claw back some of the freebies. And I was unwise or wise enough at the last meeting to give my personal email address, and it's certainly been interesting to get some of the emails as to where people say, well, you can touch this, but please don't touch that because this is what I benefit from. As we hear, life is always like that. It's about what's in it for me. But I think this is really an opportunity to hear from you. It's an opportunity to listen to you. And it's also an opportunity as one frames budget 2012-13 to see what are some of the pressure points. But the bottom line is that you have to provide stimulus, and at the same time you have to sustain a certain level of delivery of services, but you also have to try and do it in a way that is sustainable in terms of our public finances. And even though we are working assiduously, we're not, because of the effect globally, you're not seeing all the level of tourism and the level of tourism development that you want at this particular place in time, even though there are some interesting and innovative opportunities that you'll hear from the various ministers. So I have painted the broad stall as to open budget, what it represents, and also the way it works in terms of, I suppose, from a sort of fiscal framework. The other beauty of the open budget system is that while in capital expenditure plans, like the young man who talked about the community center, that is, as a matter of rote, dealt with over a multi-year framework. We don't always talk about a medium-term expenditure framework in terms of our current account expenditure. And that's what we're saying, and that was the point I made to the young man today. We may not have money to do something now, but it's not necessarily no, it's more not at this time. And the beauty of a framework is that you're able to spread it over a few years, and as the economy does well, then you can also change your fiscal policy and how you spend. But that's the ball of wax in terms of an open budget and also in terms of the medium-term economic framework, which I think is really the way that good governance and good governments and also fiscal frameworks are better aligned to the needs of the country, especially at a time of tremendous need. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.